everybody, it's me, Carmine DiStefano, the Bookman.
They call him the Bookman, his rants never end. He's angry and he's loud and he has a lot of friends. If you have Alyssa Milano's number, you can always send it to Carmine DiStefano, the Bookman.
That song don't make no sense.
Hello everybody, it's me, Carmine DiStefano, the Bookman. Heroines. Ever since the dawn of storytelling, these special leading ladies apparently don't get the same due credit as their male counterparts. In tribute, I shall spend the first month of this new year paying homage to a few of those female protagonists we don't really pay much attention to. Starting with, back in 2002, Alice Sebold produced a novel about a young victim of a rape/murder named Susie Salmon and her wild escapades through Alice's version of heaven. Then, with the help of Peter Jackson, the film adaptation was released at the end of 2009 called The Lovely Bones. What was the fuss all about? Well, let's take a look at it together, shall we? Movie opens with a young Susie Salmon and her father, played by Mark Wahlberg. By law, I must do this.
It says Dirk Diggler.
The feminine side of our family is her mother, played by Rachel Weisz. And that's right. Yes, I would. As she gets older, Susie becomes more and more capricious and takes a lot of pictures. And I mean a lot of pictures. Pictures of everything she sees. She also has an interest in this young man who really doesn't have much of a role in this movie, so we'll move on. But her picture taking leads her to meeting up with her neighbor, played by Stanley Tucci. But still her interests are in this particular young man whom she tries to get really close with, but never seems to have the opportunity because of this psychic chick. One day, while hanging alone in a field, she meets up with...
Oh, shoot. I hope that was your homework.
Kids, can you say... villain? This rather strange individual has the ability to convince the independent thinking, intelligent Susie to go with him in this underground shack he put together, with a bunch of strange looking collections and figurines. She still doesn't seem to get the point.
That's a cute hat. I like that hat very much.
Yes, now she starts to figure out the guy's a freaking nut. Though she seems to have escaped, apparently she's lost in the backdrop, as nobody can see her or hear her. We then meet up with Detective Spider from Goodfellas.
Why don't you go fuck yourself, Tommy?
Through this eerie mist, Susie comes across the house of her killer and sees the grisly after effects of his dark deed. Despite being the obvious weirdo, the police somehow overlook him. And they even paid him a visit and interrogated him and still didn't find any evidence.
Hello? Hello? Anybody home?
The family seems to be torn apart as Susie's father and sister don't want to give up on searching for her. Susie, on the other hand, is out in this crazy field. She sees the young man she has an interest in, who apparently can't get over her death. She can't get over the fact that she died and begins to sink in water, which leads her back to her house where she sees her father. She winds up in another field where she watches things happen from afar, like her beloved man moving into the arms of the psychic chick. She then meets up with Holly, who becomes her guide through this afterlife thing that opens up to more fields and wild other locations and backgrounds and what have you. While this is going on, her father seems to make a connection. But that's alright, because Holly and Susie are having the time of their deaths. in the holy heaven? Later on, her father finds undeveloped film she took and tries to help the police force track down her killer. In fact, he obsesses over it to the point of estranging himself from his wife. Her vacant behavior leads him to invite her mother over to watch her, played by Susan Sarandon. And as she adjusts, Susie's sister is starting to get the idea of who the killer was after all. This is pretty obvious, don't you think? Still finding it hard to let go, Susie's obsession leads to her father's continual obsession and her mother's departure into a tomato field of some kind.
She had 2 children.
Holly tries to convince Susie to let go, but she can't, and neither can her sister, who makes some trouble for the neighbor. As does her father, who meets up with him and sees him making a giant trap for no reason whatsoever, which leads to a very drawn-out, suspenseful bunch of nothing. Nothing happens, leads to nothing, it's just nothing. Convinced of who the killer is, her father plays it off as though he's done with the investigation. Then he grabs a bat. You know what he's thinking of?
You know what I'm thinking about, man? I'm thinking about taking some fucking ass,
I want him cold and dead with no blood in his veins. Look at me. Look at what he did to me. What am I now? The dead girl? The lost girl? The missing girl? I'm nothing.
Wow! That's a scene that came right out of left field. He tracks down the killer to this open cornfield where he gets his rear end completely rearranged by an angry man.
I was his daughter.
Afterwards, Susie comes across some more unrested spirits, including Holly, who are all the victims of the neighbor that killed her. She then notices where he hid her remains. Her sister tries to find some evidence in his house, and when she does, she narrowly escapes. However, the family doesn't seem to be too pleased with the idea, seeing as how it led to her father being injured. But it also led to her mother coming home. And the family is now back together. The killer then tries to dispose of the evidence, while Susie, in her purgatory or something, meets up with all the rested spirits of the killer's victims, which makes her want to move on with her afterlife. Before she does that, though, she uses the psychic chick as a channel to finally see her man face to face. The two of them then kiss. So what you're saying is that this vengeful spirit was satisfied in just kissing some guy she barely knew. Yeah! Now how does the problem with the killer get resolved? As he tries to find another victim, he's hit in the head with an icicle and falls to his death on this hill. And that's pretty much it. So what did I think of this movie? It's very weird and unfulfilling. It's a wild vision that's too over the top to be represented well, even with Peter Jackson. In fact, his usual dramatic undertones are overplayed, seeing as how this story has a whole lot of empty space that he fills in with elongated nothing. It's well acted out by everyone involved, including Stanley Tucci, who's so good he's almost too good. If you can't see that this guy is a killer or even just a freak of some kind, you're not paying attention enough. Let's look at the obvious. He lives alone, he acts strangely, he has a career in making dollhouses. You'd think you'd get the point. Susie's character disappointed me in the fact that her intelligence, individualism, and obsession with this man meeting his fate turned into just a blasé, laissez-faire, let's move on with our lives. Oh, but first, I want to kiss a guy I barely know. And if you ask me, the killer got off easy. Death is not always the worst possible thing. So it turned out after all, Susie Salmon was not that great of a heroine. However, next week I'll have another one to show all of you. But you'll have to wait till then. So I thank you all for watching. I have more for you soon to come. So stay tuned, take care, and have a great day.
Why don't you go fuck yourself, Tommy?